And are you ready for Brave New Writer at the BookFest Adventure? Welcome, everybody. My name is Desiree Duffy, and I am founder of Black Chateau, as well as the BookFest. And Brave New Writer is a couple of things combined. It's that old concept that a lot of writers probably have experienced. They've gone to a writer's conference or a convention where they get an opportunity to pitch agents. And it's also a little bit of, well, if we did something like this, maybe we really kind of uplift those authors because it takes so much courage, chutzpah, moxie, whatever you want to call it, to stand up there and pitch. So that's where I pulled in Selene, my co-host here. She's from Roadmap Authors. And I'll let her explain exactly what that is in a little bit. But we basically decided to team up and bring this Shark Tank-ish type show panel thing to the BookFest. So here we are. Selene, hello. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, Desiree. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, you're so right. It's like a more friendly Shark Tank, I hope.
Yeah,
a little bit. But yeah, as you said, I'm from Roadmap Authors, which is a division of Roadmap Writers. I put Roadmap Writers on my name because when you Google, you have to go to the Roadmap Writers website to then click on For Authors and find us. So it's just easier that way. Roadmap Writers has been around for, I think, going on 6 years now, and has gotten 300, I think, people signed. A lot. I've lost track. And we have been around for just over a year, Roadmap Authors. I run the program. I'm also an award-winning author myself, critically acclaimed, yada, yada. And we've gotten over 10 people signed just in the short time that we've been around. So I'm so incredibly proud of my writers. And this is what we do often, what we're doing here is pitching. It's a lot of it is just pitching to agents. And actually, Andy Ross signed someone from Eleanor Shelton from Roadmap Authors. So, he's muted. You're muted, Andy. What'd you say?
I just sent her project out last week.
Ah, awesome. Yeah, she's Eleanor is amazing. We're very proud of Eleanor, and we're very proud of mentoring people, to go out there and get agents. And so if you'd like to know more about it, feel free to hit me up on Roadmap Authors. You can get a consultation with me, no charge. But thank you, Desiree. This is just going to be so much fun today. I already met, your pictures, and they are awesome. And I cannot wait to see this unfold.
Oh, exactly. So just letting people know behind the scenes what happened is in the pitching room. You can go there. Actually, it's the pitching room on the BookFest website. Authors can upload their pitch materials. And then we selected several of them who are going to step onto this virtual stage tonight. And Selene worked with them one-on-one to really help them fine-tune and craft their pitch so that they're ready to take the stage. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for helping them out. Okay, I tell you what, why don't you go around and introduce each of our agents so people can learn a little bit more about them?
Awesome. All right, well, let's start. This is no particular order. It's how I see you on the screen. Whitney Davis, nice to meet you. Want to tell us about yourself?
Hi, guys. My name is Whitney Davis, and I have a boutique literary firm called Whitney Davis Literary, just because it was easy. I have a really interesting kind of career trajectory that I've been having for the past 15 years or so. I started out in Hollywood as a TV writer and then went on to the development side and quickly saw that so many producers and studio execs were looking for pre-existing IP that existed in book form. And so that's when I kind of got one leg in each space, kind of the literary space and the TV film space. And so I kind of have two different legs to my company. I work with writers to do editorial work to get it ready to send to agents. And then I also connect them with producers and execs in the TV film world to see if people would be interested in optioning their work. So it's a really fun and rewarding career. And I've had a lot of luck with Hallmark and Lifetime and a few other things. So it's a great experience. And I love helping people achieve their dreams. It's really fun.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you, Whitney. I'm really glad to have you here. Angela, Shantay, nice to meet you. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes. Hi, my name is Angela Shantay. I am a writer, author, editor, and new publisher of the indie publishing company, Sunday Dinner Publishing. So I'm here representing my company. We are a very small startup company. We're looking for titles from picture book illustration to middle grade YA, with the focus around marginalized voices, BIPOC, LGBTQ community. And so I'm here looking for that right now.
Awesome. Great to have you, Angela. April Eberhardt, I believe I pitched to you a very long time ago at Santa Barbara Writers Conference, I think. I'm not sure.
I think you did, Celine.
Yeah,
Your
there
name
you
sounds
go.
awesome.
So nice to see you again. So please tell us about yourself.
Okay, I'm head of April Eberhardt Literary, and I work increasingly as a consultant to authors. Although I do represent some authors traditionally, I'm finding that with the variety of publishing methods available now, including hybrid in many flavors, as well as self-publishing, that for many authors, traditional is not necessarily the right first choice or the right choice at all for publishing their book. And so I tend to work with authors across the spectrum, looking at the types of work they have and what their goals and objectives are. And then together we decide what the best direction is to go.
Awesome. That's really interesting. It's really fascinating that you do that. Thanks for being here, April. And Andy Ross, who is works with us often at Roadmap Writers, at Roadmap Authors, and again, signed our wonderful Eleanor. Andy, please tell us about yourself.
Well, hi, I'm Andy Ross, and I have a literary agency. I live in Oakland, California. Before I became a literary agent in 2008, I owned Cody's Bookstore in Berkeley for 30 years. So I've been in the business a long time, mostly at the other end of the book business. I like being a literary agent more than being a retailer. Most of what I remember about Cody's had to do with problems with the plumbing. But here I am. I enjoy my job a lot. I represent lots of different types of books, mostly nonfiction. Fiction is hard to sell, although I like working in fiction, and I do sell it sometimes. Some of probably the authors who you would have heard of that I represent are, I'll just name a few: Daniel Ellsberg, Jeffrey Messiah Mason, who wrote When Elephants Weep, Fritjof Capra wrote The Tao of Physics. Susan Griffin is sort of a legendary feminist writer who wrote Women in Nature. And I also represent Senator Jeff Bingaman of New Mexico, retired. So I do a whole range of genres. I'm not committed to any one in particular. I like YA. I probably don't really understand. I know some people are doing science fiction and fantasy here, and I have sold a fantasy book, but I'm not sure I really understand that genre as much as I may not be the right person for that. I do like YA, though. One of my books by Tawny Waters won the International Literacy Association Award. And as Celine mentioned, I have one of her authors. I submitted. It's a thriller, sort of a kind of a literary crime novel as well as a thriller, and I have high hopes for it. So that's pretty much what I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Andy, for agreeing to being with us. You're always your insights are always amazing. So welcome, everybody.
I'm just kind of curious, maybe we can start with Whitney. Is there anything specific that you might be looking for, even not just from the pictures today, but just in general, so that people know what you might be in the market for?
Yeah. I'm always looking for, obviously, because Hallmark's one of my best clients, like they just kind of have a formula and it works for them. And there's oftentimes lots of stories out there that fit the Hallmark kind of, I don't even know, format, if you will. So I'm always looking for really sweet romantic comedies for Hallmark. And then on the total flip side, kind of similar to what Andy was saying, Lifetime loves thrillers and things, psychological thrillers, things of that nature. So I feel like there's lots of books out there that totally have the potential to make that transition from book to film. So those things in particular are things that I really look for on the book side of things, the literary side of things. I feel like I've had the most, it's again ironic what Andy said, I feel like I've had the most luck with kind of fantasy. So for whatever reason, just the agents that I know tend to look for that type of stuff. So I kind of am a go-between on the literary side. I'm not exactly, I'm more on the TV film side, but on the literary side, I'm more like a go-between or a conduit to getting an agent. So those things are kind of the things that I'm most interested in, that I can actually assist people with. I'm interested in a lot of things, but in terms of how I can help, those are the things that I look for.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think it's just always important that authors, and again, even beyond the ones that we have for today, just realize who they're pitching to, because sometimes they internalize, oh, this person doesn't like my work. Well, they might not just be in the market for your type of writing.
Exactly. And I think that that's something that writers always should remember. Oftentimes the no isn't even about not having a necessary distaste for their work. It's just that either they oftentimes people come to me and I'm like, I literally have nowhere to take it. I like it, but I just have nowhere to take that. Like Andy said, I'm not the person for that. And then I try to connect them to someone who maybe can. But yes, I think that's such a good reminder that oftentimes the no isn't even because they have poor skills. It's just that we don't have anywhere that we personally know to take it, and we're not the right fit for them. And it's not personal. It's just contacts, So I think that's such a great point.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember, I always say this to everyone first, that in this business, it's sort of like Hollywood, that there's a lot of rejection just because it's like being an actor, and you got to be able to manage that. And it usually, as Whitney said, it isn't necessarily about you. It usually isn't. By the time it gets through, to an agent and an agent submits it to a publisher, it's been pretty well vetted. And I found that publishers more often than not reject books based on marketing considerations rather than sort of aesthetics. The book has to be good, and it probably will be good if you find an agent who will represent you. But even then, I like to say my job is sort of like my social life in high school. I get a lot of rejections from publishers, and it's usually because of something like, well, it's too dark. We don't think reading groups will like it, or we had something like this a few years ago and Barnes and Noble didn't want it. Those are really marketing considerations.
Yeah.
So I think it's important not to take these things too personally. And if at the end of the day you haven't gotten your book published, move on to the next project.
Exactly. And Angela, I think you already touched on it because your children's book up to maybe a middle grade YA. Was there anything else that you wanted to add?
Not necessarily. We're looking for quippy characters, strong leads, whole characters, specifically ones of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, or coming from the LGBTQ community. So those are the voices that we're trying to highlight.
Excellent. And April, was there anything in particular that you might be in the market for?
Sure. I typically traffic in mainstream / book club fiction, mostly by women, sort of by, for, and about women. And I wanted to add one thing to what Whitney was saying, that frequently I find that we need to turn down manuscripts that tend to be very good, well written, because the publishing industry, like every other industry, has trends, and it goes through ups and downs and waves. And whereas fantasy may be something of interest this week, next week we'll hear from a publisher that has fallen out of favor, sometimes because they have a book that didn't do well in a genre. But again, there are waves of preferences out there in the reader world, and we want to make sure that we are aligning what we're representing with what the market is looking for. And one other thing quickly, I work a lot with Amazon Publishing, which, as many of you may know, now has a traditional publishing arm with 18 imprints. And of course, they have all the analytics to determine what is selling. And so it's very interesting to talk to Amazon first to find out whether this is something that actually is trending or dipping. And that often will give me an indication to where the market is headed.
And I was going to say one thing real quick, just to back up on what April was saying. oftentimes you find, and this is what I tell my clients, it's like, don't necessarily write to the trends, exactly what April's saying, because you have to remember through the traditional publishing route, like that book has been in like the works for like a year and a half, potentially at the publishing company. So what you're seeing on the shelves right now, like that's kind of already been there and done that. Like totally write what you think you want to see or what people want to see, but not necessarily to the, like right when, back in the day, forever ago, when Twilight came out, everybody was pitching vampire stuff just because Twilight did well. And when Hunger Games, everyone was pitching apocalyptic stuff just because of that. So, they get their stuff and then it's kind of like, well, it's just like what we just had. So that's why I always encourage people, write what you know, write what you're passionate about, because that passion will come out in your work. And they're always looking for something fresh and new and noisy, like different. And so I just wanted to piggyback on that it's such a good concept to consider, that don't necessarily write to the trends because the trend may already have passed for sure.
Excellent. Okay, guys, what's going to happen? Selene and I are going to disappear and we're going to make enough room. We're going to bring on our first pitcher. I'm not going to give you anything other than his name. We're going to now welcome Neil Perry Gordon as the first pitcher in Brave New Writer.
Hi.
Hi, Neil.
Hi. So my name is Neil Perry Gordon, and I'm an author of 7 published novels, delving into the genres of metaphysical and historical fiction, oftentimes blending both. Today, I'll be speaking about my latest manuscript, Utzi's Odyssey. So Utzi's Odyssey is the journey of a troubled soul seeking redemption for a 5,000-year-old bargain he made to save his family and clan, that consequently doomed him to an eternity among the 4 demonic realms of Gehenna. My story falls within the compelling genre of metaphysical fiction, though I also draw upon historical facts with the telling of the fascinating archaeological discoveries, both in the past 30 years and what life was like 5 millennia ago during the Neolithic Age, when an ancient civilization dwelled within the foothills of the snow-capped Italian Alps. Its literary comparison can be said to be a blend between Dante's epic poem Inferno and Jean Auel's novel The Clan of the Cave Bear. So, Utzi's Odyssey opens in the year 1991 with the remarkable sighting of an ancient mummified man, half frozen into glacial ice, who was stumbled upon by 2 mountain hikers. Along with this profound archaeological discovery, the soul of this 5,000-year-old Iceman is awakened. Utzi the Iceman's story travels in time, beginning in the modern era, where his observant soul tries to comprehend the reason for being tethered to this frozen mummy, along with making sense of a mind-bending, technologically advanced world. We are then ushered back to 3500 BCE, to the life and times of Clan Chief Bark, as he lives with his family in a peaceful village built upon still tomes that cling to the shore of the Great Lake Neath, located in the shadows of the ominous Similon Mountain. Bark and his family are ambushed by his rival Shardak, insisting that Bark is not the clan's rightful heir. A subsequent encounter with the soul hunter Kriok, who promises to return to Bark all that was lost, ends up sending our hero on a perilous journey into the 4 demonic realms of Gehenna. Along the way, he receives wisdom from Miko the Seer and guidance from his clairvoyant daughter, Amika, both with abilities of piercing through the veil that separates the upper and lower spiritual realms, while Bark faces challenges by the 4 lords of Gehenna as he strives for the salvation and ultimate redemption of his eternal soul. Utzi's Odyssey is an examination of one's own journey, bringing to light that our personal stories are not limited to our earthly existence, but continue on once we leave our physical bodies and begin our ultimate journey into the cosmos. The inspiration for this tale comes from the recent passing of my 32-year-old son, whose tragic death inspired me to transform my writing into a spiritual practice. The manuscript of my novel, Utzi's Odyssey, The Troubled Soul of a Neolithic Iceman, is 71,000 words and available upon your request. Thank you, Sharks.
All right. Well, that was fascinating. Thank you, Neil, and great job. Everybody ready to give their thoughts?
Yes. Can I
All
start?
right. April, would you like to jump in?
Sure. Thank you. Neil, first of all, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your son. That must have been a terrible, terrible thing. And perhaps the only good that has come of it is that it has spurred you to write this. So thank you for sharing that with us. I was struck initially by the fact that you mentioned that this is a combination of metaphysical and historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And as you began to describe the character and the setting, it reminded me of the Iceman in Bolzano, Italy. I suspect that maybe some of your facts may have come from that. One thing that I have learned about historical fiction is that if it does, what you have written does resemble a real situation, you undoubtedly know this, but you'll want to make sure that you have researched it so that your novel reflects the reality of the situation. I find that readers of historical fiction tend to be very picky about things, and if a situation is similar to one that actually happened, they will go out of their way to find every single discrepancy in the reality. So just a caution, but I think very interesting.
I'm a New City Iceman fan. My youngest son actually visited the museum in Tyrol, Italy. So the facts are accurate that are described.
Good. Excellent.
And I've written 7 previous books of historical fiction. So, I get the genre.
Okay, good. Well, then you're already ahead of me. Just wanted to make sure that that was part of the exercise. Very good. Thank you.
Sure. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Great, April. Thanks. Let's see. Andy, would you like to speak?
Yeah. I think whenever you write a novel about sort of an alternate world, which yours isn't totally alternate, but it's not like it's not historical fiction like the Battle of World War II. There's always a big backstory which needs to get told, but if you tell it becomes boring and publishers don't like it. They call it info dumping. And I think one of the challenges of trying to pitch that story is, without getting too much into kind of explaining, it can easily be confusing. And you did a good job with that. I really felt like I kind of understood what was going on, but there were a lot of subplots and a lot of characters who were secondary characters. And at a certain point in your pitch, I kind of started having trouble keeping all the balls in the air. So to the extent that you can simplify it, I think it would be a stronger pitch. And I've seen this pretty much every fantasy book or a project of an alternative world kind of has the same challenge.
Yeah, setting up that whole world is really, really hard in a pitch, for sure. All right. Well, thanks, Andy. Whitney?
Hello, Neil. It's nice to meet you.
Hello, Whitney.
I almost did not feel smart enough for that pitch. Like, I'm going to be honest. I was just like, that was really intense. As a history minor in school and an English major, I was really fascinated by your story. And again, to echo the other participants of the panel, I'm really sorry to hear about your son. And I really hope that this writing experience was really therapeutic for you. To speak to Andy's point, I would be really interested to read it. My initial professional concern, not a bad thing, just a concern, was 71,000 words to me for a metaphysical and historical fiction book. It seems to be on the little bit of a shorter side. And so part of me is wondering if I kind of have always thought, historical fiction, metaphysical fiction, especially when you have these world building, especially this spiritual aspect to it, I'm kind of thinking that there might need to be a little bit more kind of what he said. Again, and this is all speaking to just listening to your pitch and not having read it myself, but listening to your pitch, I'm kind of wondering if there could be some parts of the plot that you hone in on and really explore more and flesh out more. And that would be, obviously whatever kind of the main, whatever the main goal is, whatever the main, thing that he's trying to accomplish is, which is, I think, getting, figuring out where his soul is, redeeming that fact. So all that to say, it's super relatable. I think everyone can relate to it. I think there's fascinating aspects to it. My one thought, so that's the positive. I think it has a really interesting, it sounds fascinating. My one thought is it might be short, but I'd be interested to see where you could maybe, part of me is thinking it needs to be around 90,000. I don't know why. So that's not a ton to add, but that's just my initial off the cuff. So don't take it as Bible. And again, I'd have to read it. But again, I feel like I'm wondering if there's just like a little bit more that you could explore or flesh out to really make it something pop and like just make it really powerful. And whatever that message is that you're trying to drive home, I'm wondering if there could just be a little bit more exploration. And that's just me. But I was really fascinated. Good job. I'm actually kind of interested in reading it. I have nowhere to, I'm going to be completely honest. So I have nowhere to take it that I know of at the moment, but I'm still kind of interested to read it on a personal, like selfish level. I'm going to stop now.
Awesome. Whitney, I just have to say, like, isn't that interesting, everybody, about the word counts, right? Like, we're so slave to a word count. It's crazy.
You know what? I totally agree with you. I'm not and that's why I kind of put that disclaimer in there that I'm not necessarily married to that. Like, that's why I said it may need it.
But the publishers are like, so like, yes. But the worst is if it's too much, exactly. Like, forget it. They won't even look at it if it's a certain word count.
And you know what? And that's why I think having, someone like, I don't do a ton of consulting anymore. I'll come out of retirement sometimes, but having someone like April or someone else to speak to that, I think that having read it and then being like, hey, either we lengthen it and pitch it like this, or we potentially shorten it and pitch it like this. And so you have to find that right balance of how to pitch it, knowing your market. Is it fleshed out enough? Do we take it down? There's definitely that delicate balance. And I agree, you shouldn't be married to a word count, but yes, they have to know where it's landing and how they're going to, with it. So totally.
That was one of a pretty big issue, both with agents and with publishers. There's an issue with agents because publishers ask them, what's the word count?
Right.
This isn't the 19th century when people had a lot of time and you can introduce Jean Valjean in Les Miserables on page 75.
Yes.
You pretty much have to start the book in the first paragraph. And a story has to be as long as a story has to be. And if you're Jonathan Franzen, you can do a 250,000 word novel and get away with it. But if you're not, you can't. Most agents would be very resistant to novels that are more than 100,000 words because of the time consideration and because publishers. I want to talk about publishers are going to be resistant as well.
The Republicans are always resistant.
they resist. I mean, this is one of the first times I've ever heard advice that you should make something longer.
Usually, I know. That's why I had to mention it. Shorter. Yes.
And most of the experience I have with authors is try to figure out stuff they can leave out. And usually they need to leave stuff out.
So maybe Neil has just gotten every single word right. We hope, I think it's a very unique situation to talk about having too few words. I don't think I've ever heard it before in recent times. So I had to bring that up. But Angela, what do you think?
I don't have much to add, but I think piggybacking off of what Whitney said, I circled the word count as well and put a couple of questions around it. It did seem kind of short to me. And then I wrote a few questions about your target and your target market age, because I'm looking for kidlit. Obviously, this is not that, but as a springboard of the short length of the thing, I was like, well, I wonder what his target is, because if it's a little younger, then I guess that could maybe work. But in critiquing your pitch, you always want to have a couple of comps that are like up to date modern comps. And that was one of the things that I like Dante, obviously I've read it. But you want to have something that's more modern and up to date in the market. So like, as you're starting to kind of like hone in your pitch, I think having some titles that are current comps might help it.
That was my only comment.
That's a tough one too. Like, because is it what do you, I know we're running out of time. We have to go to the next person, but this is a good question for a lot of people who pitch. It's not, you don't think it's okay to slip in a classic?
I think a classic is fine if the other comp or the other comps around it are a little bit more modern and up to date.
Yeah, Clan of the Cave Bear is old, but it did seem perfectly relevant. I'm going to tell you, I gave him that comp, so it's my fault. But it just seemed like it fit, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was an awesome job, Neil. I think you did great.
Oh. Yeah, I'm sorry, I bumped him. I have the power back here. Excellent. I just wanted to say really quick for the people who are getting queued up, if you try to get in the room and you can't get in, just try again. We've only got 10 spots. That's the problem. So that's why you might not be able to get in right away. But without further ado, I am now going to bring onto the stage David A. Wimsett. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm David A. Wimsett, and I am presenting my 1,000-word children's pictures book, The Ant and the Magician. This is a story whose theme is even the smallest among us are able to make a big difference in the world if we use our wits and we. In the story, a magician lives on a castle up on a hill overlooking a valley, and it's filled with fields, but he has no farmers because he uses the winds to sow, to plow, and to sow, and to reap the profit. But this is so they hold a meeting under an old oak stump, and they're filled with suggestions that someone else should be doing. But a little voice speaks up in the back, and they turn around and they see a little ant. And they all laugh and say, "But you don't have teeth like the fox or claws like the bear. What can you do?" And the little ant just smiles and she says, "I have the best thing of all, my wits." And indeed, she uses her wits to be able to stop the winds and never bother the animals again. Now, I am a member of the, I'm a dual Canadian-American citizen, and I'm a member of the Canadian Freelance Guild, which represents journalists in Nova Scotia and is associated with the Communication Workers of America. I'm also a member of the Writers Union of Canada. Other members include Margaret Atwood and Michael Indangio. I have my short story entry into the Askins 2021 short story competition was a runner-up, and I was one of the winners of the Writers Federation of Nova Scotia's postcard poetry contest. I've attended the Squaw Valley Community of Writers workshops for 4 consecutive years. I have 3 novels and one. None of my works are represented professionally. I have, in addition to being a author, I'm also a composer and an actor. I've been in improv. I've done children's theaters. I've also done comedies, dramas, musicals, and I give a performance whenever I make an appearance. I sing a little, I tell stories, I read from the books, and I also sing songs that I actually wrote and composed for the different fantasy novels. So I would compare this book to It's Okay to Be Different. And that's by, I believe, Stephanie Purton. And another book, What You Will Be, oops, I have to look at I have my notes here. Yes. Oh, The Wonderful Things You Will Be, of course, by Emily Martin. This story is one that will inspire children, not so much as making a preachy sermon to them, but by integrating the theme and the concepts in the story and demonstrating them so that the children will be able to absorb and then retain them longer. It's one of 2 short children's picture books I've actually written. The other proposes that Santa Claus must be a cat, after all. It's a rhyming story. Who can crawl on top of the roofs and go down chimneys so easily? And Mrs. Claus runs the entire operation from central control up in the North Pole. So this is the picture book that I have to present to you.
Hi, David. Thanks. I have to say you did break up a few times for us, so I'm not sure if we got your information clearly. Do you want to repeat your title and your comps? Because I don't know if we got that.
You're breaking a little up on me. I may have a problem with my connection here. I'm not certain. I was saying the books would be, it's okay to be different.
No, your title of your
my
book.
title.
Yeah.
The title of my book is The Ant and the Magician. That's the title of the book.
And okay. And you did say I think we got the comps actually. And your log line, you have one sentence for it?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Do you have a log line for it? Like one sentence to sum it up?
Oh, yes. Even the smallest among us can have an impact on the world if we use our wits and find solutions that work for everyone.
Okay. All right. Well, I will let the experts have a go and give you their thoughts. April, did you start last time? I'm hitting you again. I'm sorry. Are you okay with that?
Sure, I don't mind.
Okay. Okay.
Well, David, it's lovely. Yeah. No worries. David, it's lovely to meet you. That sounds like a charming story, and you're obviously a man of many, many talents. I thought the pitch sounded fine. Unfortunately, I do not represent children's work, so it's hard for me to have an opinion on the content, but I can tell you that from a structural perspective, you answered the questions I always like to have answered in a pitch, which is who, what, where, and why should I care? And what does this resemble? And you did you got all that down in spades. So thank you very much. And I hope that among us, someone will say, great, that sounds like my kind of work because I represent children's work, which I don't.
Awesome. Thanks, April. Angela?
David, I really enjoyed this pitch. One of the things that I feel, and maybe it could have been the connection, was the why. So why this story? I think when I adopt a book or when I acquire a book, it's always a personal connected story. So what's your connection to this story?
Personal connection? It's simply a story that I decided I wanted to write to be able to demonstrate that small people can get things done. I guess the only personal connection would be that I have had a number of struggles in my life that have made my life not particularly smooth sailing. And I've had to be able to come up with ways to be able to overcome a lot of obstacles. I wouldn't go into necessarily into great detail, but there have been points in my life in which I thought I would just stumble and not get back up, but I always did. And it was simply perseverance. And there's also sometimes a lot of people who sort of helped out and reached down and helped to pull me back up again. So I've experienced what it's like to be small. I'm a large guy. I'm 180 pounds, 6 foot tall. But I was often out of my control, in which I had to find within myself, well, how do I overcome this? How do I actually move forward? And I did.
Okay, I think as you're tightening up this pitch, I would add more of that into it and leave out some of the things that are not specific enough, like the novels, because you're pitching your picture book. You want things to kind of feel like they're in the same vein. So I would totally include that and take out some of the other kind of like previous projects, things like that, just so that it feels like a cohesive pitch. Yeah.
That's great advice. Thanks, Angela. Whitney?
Okay, had to unmute myself. Hi, David. It's so nice to meet you. I, too, unfortunately, don't work in children's books, but I was going to give a little bit of, I thought it was great. One thing that I loved is the title. I always think that for my colleagues that I know that do work in children's literature, that simple is always best. And I think that The Ant and the Magician is a really nice, simple, clear title. And the magician part to me like indicates that, good change is going to come. So I really think that your title is spot on and great. I will say that this is not meant to be a detriment at all. I think that getting children's books sold tends to be really hard because they're just so inflooded with them. So one thing that I was just going to put out there is like, I've had so many friends that have had a lot of, and this is not to say by the way, what I'm about to say is not to discourage you from querying professionally. I'm just saying I personally have had a lot of friends that have had a lot of good success hiring their own artist, or if you can do it and just doing it themselves and marketing themselves. And they've gotten into schools, they do like book fairs and all sorts of things. I just wanted to put that out there that it could possibly be something that you almost like strategize from a different point of view, just because the children's market is really tough. But I think that it sounds lovely. And again, love the title. I wish you all the best. And I was just going to say, I think that there's lots of different ways that you could approach this, but absolutely don't hesitate to query professionally. I was just going to say, I've had a lot of friends that have had a lot of luck going the independent route on children's books, and not to completely toss that out.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you for that suggestion.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
and Andy.
Well, I like the pitch too very much. I've done some work in children's books. I wouldn't call myself an expert in it, but I have gotten some books published, and I have a project now that I'm working on. I would, the one thing that struck me again is the word count. And I think it's important to, I see Angela nodding her head, and I would have to defer to Angela on anything having to do with children's books. But, it's different than it was when I was growing up, when we read Dr. Seuss and The Little House and Make Way for Ducklings. And those have much longer texts than publishers want now. And I think 1,000 words is too much. I'm not sure I'm not sure there's a complete sweet spot, but I would think, if it's longer than 500 or 700 words, I think you're going to run into problems. Angela, do you have any advice on that?
I agree. I didn't initially say anything because it felt kind of legend-y to me. And sometimes when you have like folk tales and legends kind of in that vein, you can do more words. Yeah.
But I would be concerned about that. You might want to talk to a freelance editor, preferably one who has worked in children's publishing, who could probably give you some good advice on that. But my experience has been that they really do count words for picture books.
Oh yeah, I a lot of my books are picture books. I actually just sold a picture book on Friday. Oh. And they do have to be very pithy. There better be a very good reason why you have 1,000 words. It better be the best. They have to really all be necessary. Every single word counts in a picture book. I do suggest, if you're not already in it, to join the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, otherwise known as SCBWI.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah. I'm an regional advisor actually for Long Island. I do a lot of things. So you can really get immersed there and learn, and you could that would be a great source for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. There we go.
That is so hilarious.
I'm sorry. Am I doing that too fast? I'm kind of.
It's like, wow.
Sorry. I'm like, is she ready? Is she ready? Click the button. Oops, he's gone.
That's fine.
Celine, I was just about to say that. That was so funny. Like the minute you said that, I was like, SCBI. He needs SCBI.
There we go. We're in sync.
That's fabulous. Fabulous. Okay, guys, are you ready? Next up, we have Susanna, Heyman, Chaffee for you. Okay.
You're muted, Susanna. You're muted. Unmute yourself.
Hi, Susanna. There you go. Can you talk a little bit? We can't hear you.
I still can't hear Susanna. Yeah.
Can you check your connection there? All right. You know what? I tell you what, the phone number for Dave to call if you've got technical problems. I'm going to take you off. You can call Dave. And the good news is we have John Palisano, our next pitcher, standing by. So I'm going to pitch hit with John Palisano, and Susanna, call the phone number to call Dave, okay? And he'll help you troubleshoot your microphone issue, okay? All right. I'm going to take you out. And John, I hope you don't mind me plopping you in here a little bit early.
I'm ready.
All right. All right. Go at it.
All right. Hi, everybody. How are you doing? Happy Sunday, and thanks for your time and for coming. I'm going to start with a question today. How cool would it be if we really knew what animals were thinking and talking? about. Pretty cool, huh? That's something that's always fascinated me. So I wrote a book about it, kind of, sort of. It's called Lost Canyon. It's a young adult echo thriller, clocking in at about 77,000 words. And the elevator pitch is about, here we go. When Jesse Vasquez takes a job at an animal research facility, he finds a secret underground cave. It's filled with water deep under the Mojave Desert. But what was lost is found when everything he thought he knew gets turned upside down. So that's the quick pitch. I would say, as far as comps and comparisons, Lost Canyon is The Lost World meets The Abyss by way of Jane Goodall. It is a YA. Our lead character, Jesse Vasquez, is 21 years old. He's ending a relationship and he's looking for a new job. And he finds one at an animal research facility, an animal rescue research facility in the middle of the Santa Clarita Mountains. And what he doesn't realize is what he's stumbling into is a place where he's going to have to stay there for 30 days because he's been secretly deprogrammed of his testosterone. And there is a research facility underneath the original animal rescue facility. And there's a habitat there where there's great apes and they're able to communicate. And his job is to talk to them and find out with them what's going on. And he stumbles upon something even greater after a couple of weeks. There's an underground lake hundreds of feet under this facility. And inside this lake, there is an otherworldly, strange presence called Animus that is doing some very strange things to the animals and the people. And meanwhile, we have some animal rights activists that feel that these great apes are being held against their will. And they are plotting a great rescue of all these great apes and other animals that are at this facility. Disaster ensues.
All right. Excellent. Well, that was, I think, very succinct. Good job, John. Whitney, you just raise your hand?
Yes. Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one thing that I wanted to tell you, I actually am excited because I'm going to help you a little bit on your pitch.
Okay.
One thing that I do know about is young adult fiction because I've done a lot of consulting there and I've also pitched a few young adult projects before. But one thing I was going to let you know is technically, and this is just to help hone your pitch, like your concept is really interesting, but when you have a protagonist that's 21, it technically is better to pitch it as new adult. That's a little bit older than young adult fiction. And so technically new adult fiction is when your protagonist is somewhere between the ages of 80 and 30, but they're still kind of dealing with coming of age issues. So in the future, I would really encourage you to pitch it as a new adult project. And now that's really popular right now. There's a lot of popular titles out there. So I would encourage you to Google new adult and see what's out there. The other thing is it's really fascinating I can't honestly say, like, as a person who works in the industry, it always fascinates me when I can honestly say I haven't really heard of anything like that before. Like, I honestly can't say that I've heard of anything like this currently. So I think that that's a really strong concept for you. The one thing that I would really encourage you to do when it comes to your pitch is that when you're pitching a story like this, where you're kind of blending fantasy and reality a little bit, I would really encourage you to wrap the pitch around why finding this lake or finding this new different world is directly related to Jesse. Like, how is it connected to him? What are the stakes for him? Why is this important to him? Like, is there something directly connected to him or to his past or something that he finds out? And maybe that's there and you just didn't include it in the pitch. Because obviously we haven't read it, but that just left me wondering, like, exactly what that connection was and what the stakes were. Like, obviously it's amazing to find something like that. Like, that's totally trippy and cool. But I think just to have that personal connection to your main character of why is this important for him and how does it relate and what are the stakes involved? But otherwise, it was truly fascinating. I really like the title. Those were just some constructive feedback that I wanted to give you that I think will really revolutionize your pitch as a whole and will really help you be more successful.
Cool. I can answer that question really quick.
Go ahead.
Animus is actually a healing entity.
Okay.
We're so used to monsters being these horrible things that are hell-bent on destruction. Animus is a peace-giving healing thing. And his mom is dying of cancer.
Okay.
And he moves his mom into the facility.
Okay. So I'm going to let the other panelists go because we have such a limited amount of time, but that is what we needed to know. And you definitely need to include that in your pitch.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I say something? I work in YA a lot. I like YA. And I agree with Whitney that you got to make a decision here. Either it's YA. I wouldn't say at this point, I would call it new adult. That's a genre that in publishing they thought was going to be big, but they seem to have dropped it. So I think you need to decide whether it's an adult novel, an adult fantasy, or whether you want it to be YA. And the formula for YA is that they really, if you turn your character into 17 years old, then it would be a very fine YA book. Well, sort of. One of the problems with YA is about 95% of teenagers who read YA are girls. So you have to have a subject that engages girls, okay? Romance is always a good way to do that. And maybe your story works better with a 21-year-old or a 25-year-old, and then it's not YA, which is fine. It's a very creative story. From the top of my head, I would say it doesn't sound like YA. That it's going to be adult fantasy, which is fine. It's an original concept, and good luck with it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Angela, would you like to go?
I mirror up many of the things that Whitney said, and Andy, I think YA, you want your character's a little bit too old to fit in that. I'm fine with it being new adult. I would say there seemed to be a piece that we were missing in the plot. Okay. There was a lot of world building, which I love. I love the world building that you have, but what's pushing the plot forward? Yes, what's the stakes for the main character? I think that was the missing piece for me in the pitch. Once you're, honing it in, make sure that you hammer that down, because you do a great job with explaining the world and the different components and, just setting up the scenes. But I'd like to see, what's the thread? What's that problem and solution that Jesse is facing towards the end of it? Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
That's a really good point, Angela, because we need to know that driving force, because it's his journey. We have to know what is he's propelling us. What is it that's propelling him? And I think you have all the components there, John. You just have to make them clear into your pitch. That's all.
And the mom, you have the elements there, but definitely that should be a part of the pitch.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
And April?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that you really caught my attention initially by asking the question, which is, don't you ever wonder what animals are really thinking about because they can't talk? And then I felt there was a disconnect. I didn't hear you come back to that. You had some very interesting plots going on, but I didn't hear a link between the very interesting opening line and the pitch. And I would really like to hear more about that. And I would, we each have our own takes on titles. I know Whitney liked the title. I found Lost Canyon to sound too generic to me. I wanted to know, especially because I had animals in my mind, and animals, what are they thinking? The title didn't do it for me. And I was really eager to hear more about your initial premise, as stated, and then how the title would actually reflect that.
And just to pop in, John, this is a good example of how pitching to different people produces different feedback. Because I thought, and again, now that she's saying that, I totally see her perspective. And I'm like, oh yeah. But the end, I was kind of envisioning the lake underneath and all the things hidden there. And so I was looking at it from a completely different perspective. So for anyone's watching later, this is a total awesome lesson in the differences in how people respond to pitches and titles and all that. Some people are yes, and some people are I don't know. So just great example.
That's right. And it's really important that one person's opinion is not gospel, unless it's mine, but that's a joke. But you have to listen to all the feedback and take the time and just think about it and what hits you in your heart. That's then I mean, certain things, we are word count, this and that. These are very important things. But when regarding the pitching and your story, just think about what everybody said, and hopefully you can find the thing in your heart that hits you right. It's like that's really what it amounts to, because we spend a lot of time writing these things, and we love our stories and we want to be true to them. But I do agree with April. What April said, I wasn't. It's funny because I wasn't even thinking about that by the time we came to the end, because so much else had happened. But you're right, April. Yeah. So there you go. But that was a good job, John. I thought you described it well.
Thank you.
Yeah. So good luck with
All
everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. Very valuable feedback, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Take care, John.
That was fabulous. It looks like we're still working to get Susanna up and running, but that's okay, because we do have Jessica Grace Vargas, who I'm going to pull up next. And just a reminder to the audience that we're going to probably do a couple of questions at the end, as long as they're really good questions. And you can ask those in the chat on the website or on YouTube. Just ask them in the chat. We got helpers behind the scenes that will feed those to me to pass on, and that'll be at the very, very end. But right now, without further ado, like I said, let's bring Jessica up for you guys, okay?
Okay, there we go. My name is Jessica Grace Vargas, and the project that I'll be pitching is called The Luminary. It is a 90,000 word completed young adult sci-fi fantasy novel, which takes place on present day Earth in Tucson, Arizona. The protagonist of The Luminary is named Kennedy. She's kind of an outcast because she was born with alien abilities. Of course, she doesn't know they're alien when the book starts, but she believes she inherited these abilities from her father, a man she's never met but is desperate to find. She doesn't learn of her true heritage until she's accepted into the Luminary Institute, which is made up of beings from all over the universe. Some of the most advanced beings of the universe have gone through the Luminary Institute. So when she decides to go to this distant paradise planet is when she really begins to learn about her father, and it's really her motivation for wanting to go. While she's there, she encounters all kinds of sights and wonders and advanced technology. She meets lots of aliens, obviously, some who look very human, some who really don't. And she makes fast friends with her roommates, who she kind of develops like a hilarious Fab Four type relationship with them. She also falls in love with a dreamy alien named Reddick, who she feels is like light years out of her league. But after a lot of will they, won't they do have some really romantic scenes together. Ultimately, I'd say The Luminary is a coming of age story set on a distant planet. It is contemporary, but I did work to try to make it timeless at the same time. Ultimately, she does find her father with the help of her friends and after many, many failed attempts. But more importantly, she finds herself, and she finds the place where she feels she truly belongs and she can be her most authentic self, which is important to me. It's light sci-fi, so you don't have to be an astrophysicist to understand it. But the reason I'm the one to tell this story is I am actually, I know I don't look it, but my father's from Mexico, so I have dual citizenship for both countries. And when I go to Mexico, I do kind of feel like an alien sometimes, and it feels alien to me, even though I love it. Also, my father was in prison the whole time I was in high school. So I understand that longing, especially at that age, to know your father. What I would compare it to, I don't suffer from delusions of grandeur, but it's kind of George Lucas-y in the sense, or kind of like Star Wars, if Star Wars were told from Princess Leia's perspective, if she were human, and because it definitely is a hero's journey. I am a writer-performer, at Second City in Hollywood, or I was before the pandemic anyway. I also went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. I've written 2 screenplays, a TV pilot, and The Luminary has actually received some interest in the industry. 2 different production companies wanted to option it, but I was given some legal advice not to do that. So anyway, that's me.
Wow.
This is right up Whitney's alley. Look at her.
Go, girl.
Okay, first of all, real quick, I'm sorry, I'm going to be quick. Best pitch of the night by far. Like you hit everything on the head. I was totally entranced from the beginning. We knew what was at stake. You told us why it was a story that meant to you, especially when you wrapped it into the alien, half Mexican, like you feeling like an alien. I mean, I was entranced. The Luminary is an amazing title, right on target for word count. But most importantly, that was like a picture. I mean, I hate to say, I'm sorry. I mean, that was a picture perfect pitch. There was not one thing I could say to make that any better. Blew me out of the water. Holy cow. Like, I want to read it. Like, stick a fork in me, I'm done. Like, you didn't. Like, I'm like chomping at the bit now. That was fantastic. Maybe other people have things to say, but I just had to be like, holy cow, you nailed it.
I'm with Whitney. I don't have anything to critique. I would also love to read it.
Nice.
Yeah, we would love it at Sunday Dinner Publishing. So yeah, and I think that you hit all of the, everything that, all the questions that I always have, you checked it off. Comps are really good. Connection to the story is amazing. Your pacing. Oh, is that a puppy? Oh, that's a cat.
It's a cat. He says hi.
Can I also just say that the teen girl inside me is dying at the whole romance scene, and that the Reddick name is like so damn sexy. Like, excuse my language. Like, it was great. Sorry, Andy. He's probably like rolling his eyes internally, but I love it.
Did you how old are the characters? Because I think I missed that. Sorry.
She's 16. She turned 17 in the book though, so 16 going on 17.
The only thing I was going to mention was how old is the character, which is it's the right age for YA, and it was the best pitch. It was a very good pitch, and it sounds
guys, come on.
And it covers a lot of themes that all. I'm really interested in YA fiction. I don't know why. I didn't intend to do it when I first got into this business, but I really like it. I think all YA fiction are coming of age stories. Most of them are heroes' journeys. Most of the ones that work have a lot of romance involved. Comparisons to Star Wars. It's good. Don't compare it to the new.
But from the Princess Leia perspective, that is what people. I mean, dang.
Yes, and as a feminist, I'm like, I want it. Give it to me now.
That was a good job. I think you're really onto something, and also your story as a writer interested me. You're a real writer. You have to deal with the commerciality of stories. And that's important when I work with an author who really understands that and understands that, the king here or the queen is not the writer. When you go to get your MFA program, they say, well, it's important that your internal authenticity is the key thing. No, the key thing is the reader, and that you have to understand as a writer. You have to be able to put yourself in the role of the reader and have their perspective. And by the way, I've never known an author who really does have a perspective of what the reader is saying. And so it's my challenge as an agent to try to be the advocate for the reader. But you really seem to have you seem to understand that, and that is so important.
And if I can add, Jessica, again, I think adding why you're the person to write this really made a huge difference. I find increasingly that readers want to know authors. They may want to know too much about you. Eventually, you have to put up guardrails. But the fact is that you are the right person to write this for all the reasons that you stated. And that was really very generous of you to share some background and help us understand why you are the right author for this. And your authenticity and your sincerity comes through so clearly. And I think it would come through equally clearly on the page if you were pitching this in writing as email versus in person. But really very, very well done.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
yeah, really great. Yeah, and it was great how you said, I don't have delusions of grandeur, but that was like perfect when with the Star Wars comp. That was very good. You did and the title is beautiful. It's just beautiful.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Great
I'm
job.
shaking, so.
No, it's great. You're great.
It was awesome. Dang.
There I go again. I need a cue. I maybe Selene can give me a cue when she wants me to remove them because I'm like, oh. she is backstage though, and she can still hear. So yeah, I think.
Okay, yeah. Well, she was great. How do you have a process for getting her to submit her manuscript to?
Yeah, so she has her pitching materials in the pitching room, and all of the agents have access to that. Not only what the public sees, the public view, because that's one thing, but the synopsis and the full or not the full read, but sample chapters, everything is there. Awesome. However, if anybody can't find anything or you want me to directly connect you, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know. I'll make sure that you are connected. Because it kind of sounds like maybe Angela and Whitney are going to throw down over her.
It seems that way. Seems that way.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
She was so good.
She was.
It was excellent. Great to see. Okay, well, somebody else who is also just so good is Mike Robinson. I'm going to pull him in next. Yeah. Oh,
really?
Ooh.
Wow.
We'll see how this plays out. Here comes Mike.
You? I do know Mike.
Yes. Hey, Whitney. How's it going?
Yeah.
It's been a long time over the Gulf of COVID. Hi, everyone. So my name is Mike, obviously. I have an adult contemporary eco-fantasy. It's called Ancient Tides Ashore. It's 86,000 words. And the story follows two timelines. The first involves an ancient Polynesian man named Kaimi, who is part of the first fleet to discover the Hawaiian Islands. The other follows a modern Mormon woman named Marilyn, living in Los Angeles, but who visits Hawaii on a trip. And then both Kaimi and Marilyn share a secret sensitivity to strange elemental creatures or earth spirits. Some cultures call them fae or fairies. And they're both brought together eventually. Their timelines braid together. They're brought together across time. And they soon realize that they need to start shedding their customs, in Marilyn's case, her faith, to start understanding and embracing the secret reality that they share, and to confront a malevolent earth spirit that threatens a modern community on the island of Kauai. It's an interesting, there's a novel of contrasts. There's modern and the ancient meeting. There's tropical paradise and paranormal terror. As I mentioned, it's an adult contemporary eco-fantasy. And I think the general ballpark would include other books like Ka, Dar Oakley and the Ruin of Ymir by John Crowley, and The Midnight Library more recently by Matt Haig. So it's and it touches on environmentalism. It touches on the kinship of humanity across time and religion and culture. As I mentioned, the main character, Marilyn, she lives in LA. She's raised Mormon. She married early and has 3 kids. The marriage is kind of shaky, though. There's love there, but they tolerate each other. She's a gamer. She's an amateur artist and a fantasy nerd, and so has that escapist imagination and enjoys kind of being a virtual hero. But when she's given the opportunity to confront her actual kind of psychic ability, she begins to treat it like a grand mission, and she sheds her faith and starts to develop almost a messianic complex about herself before facing a reckoning near the end. And I would say it's much more character oriented than plot driven, although there's certainly a ticking clock, because there's a force in the bay where she's of the Hawaiian resort where she's visiting, and it essentially is trying to summon enough energy to create a tidal wave to wipe out the population there. And there's threads, as I mentioned, it's an eco-fantasy. There's threads of environmentalism, there's threads of our effect on the environment, and any number of things. So that is it in a nutshell.
Oh, there we go. Yay. I'm like, I can't get in there. Great job, Mike. Let me see. Angela, would you like to give us your comments?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's not necessarily something that we're looking to acquire right now, but I think that you hit up all of the elements of a good pitch. You talked through all of. I like that you set it up at the beginning where it was like it's 2 plots, and you kept us kind of like organized that way. I don't really have any suggestions. I think you did pretty well. Thank you.
Awesome. Yes. April.
Thank you. Mike, can you tell me the title again? I missed what the title was.
It's called Ancient Tides Ashore.
Ancient Tides Ashore. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I found it intriguing. First of all, I think dual plot lines are very popular right now. Everyone seems to like them, particularly if there's a modern day and a historical day, but not necessarily. But the fact that you had these two plot lines, that they are your book is primarily character driven, was very interesting. The settings were unique. I mean, who doesn't like a book set in Hawaii, particularly on the island of Kauai? That sounds very interesting, especially now that people are not traveling as much. Everyone wants to get away.
Right.
So
yeah, I've never quite that I can remember or think of. I've never seen a dark fantasy set on Hawaii necessarily, or in a tropical area. So I thought that was kind of an interesting change of venue.
The contrast, yeah, I like that. The fact that it was a dark fantasy, but set in a beautiful place. Absolutely. And again, the pitch was really very thorough. You did a nice job. Your pacing was very good. You may have read it, but it didn't seem like you were reading it. And it sounded like a discussion of a book that you were enthusiastic about, and it made me enthusiastic as a result of it. So really very, very well done.
That's well said.
Thank
I
you
have
very
to
much.
say, don't you guys remember when the Brady kids were cursed in Hawaii and then they got lost? I mean, that's pretty dark. Okay. That's a good comp for you. Andy?
Well, I go to Kauai a lot, and I'm going there in about a month. So if you need someone to do research for you, you can call me up.
Oh, I love Kauai. Yeah, I've been there many times.
Yeah, no, I know. It's my favorite place. Braided Narratives. April's right. People, they do seem to like them, but they're tricky, and they're a real challenge because publishers like to reject things. And having a braided narrative gives them twice as many opportunities to find ways to reject it.
That's very true.
And it's just difficult to pull off. It has to be done carefully, and it's a challenge. That's my only comment about that. As far as your pitch went, I realized this is a character-driven novel, but I didn't have a real sense of what the plot was, particularly if you're writing in a very commercial genre, which fantasy is. I think publishers are going to say, well, what's the narrative arc here? And since you've got a braided narrative, you're going to have 2 narrative arcs that better come together.
Sure, of course.
And
yeah.
I just didn't have a sense of that.
Yeah, it's essentially the 2 main characters who are separated by cultures and time, who have to embrace the same, for lack of a better term, other reality and other ability of theirs that they share, and mobilize within a certain time frame in order to stop a disaster. That's essentially the arc.
The other side of the story is when you're making a pitch. The worst pitches I get, and it usually is with people writing fantasy, is that they try to recite the plot points. They want to give us a synopsis. In most fantasies, they have lots of different plots and a million characters, and their names are all only have consonants.
Right.
You just can't follow them, and you didn't do that. So you have to kind of find a balance between, saying kind of what the concept of the plot is and sort of the bare bones of the arc of the plot without just getting, overwhelmed by the details of your story.
Yeah, lost in the weeds for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's well said, Andy. I figured I'd save Whitney for last since we have a reunion of friends.
Mike and I have done a few book conferences, literary conferences together. So I know he is a talented author. Mike, I really liked it. My question was, I don't know that I'm the right person for it just because I've never really dealt with eco fantasy. But my question was, you mentioned that it was the tsunami. Was that what you said? That there was a tsunami?
Right. Yeah, that's the ticking time bomb.
Okay, so I was going to say, kind of maybe piggybacking on Andy, I'm really fascinated. Like, it makes me think, the braided timeline or the braided narrative, it makes me think of, similar other things, but it's usually like one person kind of going back in time, but either like Time Traveler's Wife or Sliding Doors or something like that. But obviously this is a whole different genre. But I was going to say, I think that's fascinating. I do believe it's tough. I do believe you can do it. I know you're really talented. I'm kind of interested to read it. But what I was going to say is, coming from like hearing the pitch, I think that knowing about that ticking clock earlier on, like potentially in the log line or just earlier on in the pitch, is enough to hook people to be like, okay, like because obviously it is character heavy and it is character based. And so that is more like, Oscar filmy to me, like, deep, because you're dealing with a lot of, like, let's just be real. Like, you're dealing with a lot of heavier dark topics, but to put that ticking time bomb on there at the beginning, that kind of brings people in to be like, oh, there's suspense here. Like, they're not just kind of having this internal journey. Like, they're literally trying to save a bunch of people in the process.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah, my only thought was, I would have loved to hear that quite earlier on. Because when I heard it at the end, I was like, oh, that changes things. Like, okay, like there's more to this than just, them coming at peace with who they are and accepting this like ability to connect or whatever. But all that to say, I was really fascinated. I liked it. I think you've taken on a huge challenge. I kind of want to look at it.
Yeah.
Is it done?
Sorry?
Is it done?
Oh, it's done. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't pitch it if it weren't done.
Well, I mean, you never know.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Oh, I get a lot of people pitching their own time.
Is it ever done? Like, is it ever? Is it ever? But no, I was just curious. But, but you did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you so much, Whitney. Yeah, it's good to see you again, too.
That's really good. That's a really good point about where you put it. It's funny how when you frame out your pitch, where am I going to put this? Where am I going to put that? It's hard to decide. Right. So that really is that's maybe the biggest challenge of a pitch. And sometimes if you have a very short time, then you're forced to choose, like, which will I save of my babies, But the tsunami thing is interesting. But I mean, can you actually stop a tsunami?
Well, no, she doesn't. That's the thing.
Oh.
There's another kind of moral victory, for lack of a better term. There's a sort of an ambiguous ending there.
But they're still racing against the clock in an attempt.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there was any hope of just because I get very upset by tsunamis.
Right, of course.
They're upsetting.
Yeah.
My house was destroyed by a hurricane, we were warned at least. But Sandy.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you. But we were warned, so we were not here. But a tsunami is like, you're dead.
Right.
So it's alarming.
But in a way, though, I think it's kind of interesting that the tsunami goes through, because then that's also kind of unexpected. Like, you would expect them to be able to stop it. So the fact that it allows it to happen, like, I think that's also kind of an interesting.
It's part of what sort of shatters her image about herself, is that she can't stop it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
That's good.
I think you should, that line right there. Yeah. Like, I think it's okay to tell the ending in pitches, and like that fascinates me. Especially when character driven.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. I mean, again, it's a case by case scenario, but I would agree with you in that case, that would work. Yeah, that would work in it for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, that's a great job, Mike.
Oh, really thank you so much.
Really good.
Yeah, thank you
great
all of
pacing
you.
Too. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I am back. So that's great. It sounded like, Whitney, you wanted to read the manuscript. That's another possible.
I mean, I can't do anything with it probably, but I still am. I love his. I mean, I've read some of his stuff before, and he's really talented. So I'm kind of interested just to see what he did with it, for sure.
Yeah, he's an amazing writer, actually.
He's really good
stuff. Now, let me ask you that. I'll ask you, Whitney, but everybody else too. So, do you sometimes see something and it might not be for you, but then you share it with an agent, a friend, somebody you know who? Yeah,
for sure. And that's why I said I don't even. Again, this is much more to me like I don't even know what the word is escaping me, but very niche oriented, like eco fantasy. I honestly can say I've never even heard of that. So like it's fascinating to me, but I just don't even know where I would take it. But that's kind of why I want to look at it being like, what am I missing here? But yes, absolutely. If I know people, I'm more than happy to pass it on if it's not something I do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, that is an interesting question, though. Okay, so like, is it better to pitch it? Because he didn't have to say it's an eco something. That's a label you put on, right?
Right.
So like, Andy, what do you think? Is it better to put something like eco into like the pitch, or should he just say, you know, it's fiction or thriller or something? Like, what would you say to that?
I'm glad he did that. It gave me kind of, I mean, there isn't, you know, people in publishing, it's not calling something an eco fantasy. It's not something, you know, there's not a bookshelf in the bookstore which says eco fantasy, but there are themes, eco fantasy. I mean, it made me understand what the theme of the book is more. It was very clear to me what the theme was. So
I mean, wouldn't like a movie like Fern Gully kind of be like eco fantasy, like anything that's like set in the wood? Like, to me, all of that, anything that's like environmental or anything like that could potentially be eco fantasy, I guess.
Oh yeah, I just do think about that. Sorry, go ahead.
It speaks to the trend. I mean, the fact that everything is ecological now, we're all interested in what's going on, that I thought it was good that he mentioned that. It doesn't mean that we would necessarily have to pitch it that way, but I thought in a verbal pitch in particular, I found it very helpful to have that up front as a hook to figure out where we were going with the pitch.
Yeah, it's just that I have heard, you know, some people so hung up on where will I put it in the bookstore, because they're so, where will it go in the bookstore? It's very important, you know. So
the bookstore would have a fantasy, an adult fantasy section, and that's fine. But you know, again, the concept of knowing that it's eco fantasy was helpful to me.
Yeah, he presented it well.
All right. It sounds like we're still waiting for Susanna. I don't know if this is a crazy idea. I'm saying this to Dave in the background, who is now ignoring me. But if you're talking to her on the phone, I could literally hold the phone up to my microphone, right? And we could see her before, so she can pop in. So if you want to give that a try, Dave and Susanna, I'm willing to try that. Hopefully it'll work. So I would hate for her to not be able to pitch, because that's an unfortunate thing. So Dave, if you want to try that, let me know. But in the meantime, we do have a few good questions, I feel, from the audience. So I'll let these roll off here. Question number 1, what is the most important part of a pitch? They're asking the query, the genre, the comps. What do you think is the most important aspect of a pitch?
I'd say all of the above. Again, a pitch really needs to have all of those elements. It needs to tell us the title, the genre, the length, ideally who the readership is, and why you are the right author to write the book. And that can all be condensed very quickly, but I think all of those elements need to be part of it.
I agree with April. I think some of the clever things that I've done when I've queried my books is tweak it per house, you know. So if it's going to a specific, or if I'm pitching to a specific type of person, I might say if they're family oriented and things like that, I might pull those things out a little bit more if I'm pitching to specific people. But yeah, I agree. Everything is important for me. I love to know the comps. I think that helps me wrap my head around anything that I'm going to acquire. And it's nice to know that authors or aspiring authors are doing that kind of like analytical work to see where their books would fit in the market. It just makes me understand that they're a little bit savvy, I think, to market shifts and where their book would fit it sales wise. So yeah.
I think the hardest part, and for me the most important part, is to have a clear concept of what the book is about. I know when I have to pitch to publishers, I need a book with a high concept. What's a high concept? You know, it's a simple log line. Okay, I had a book, for instance, which was a memoir by a woman who was a paparazzi. That's a high concept. That's all you need to know. That's what the book was about. And frequently I get books which are both fiction and nonfiction where they say, well, you know, this book is about X, but it's also about Y. And that is a clue to me that the author has a confused concept, and either that or doesn't know what the concept is. So it's very important to have. I wrote a blog once, which I called the best query letter ever written. And what I did is I tried to make a query letter for War and Peace, which is the longest book in the Western canon, half a million words, 20 major characters. And I tried to get it down to just 2 or 3 lines. So if you can do that, then I'm not sure I was successful, but that's the kind of thing you have to do.
I was going to say, can we hear it? Because now I'm dying to hear what that lines were.
I can mail it to you. If people are listening, and I have about 40 pages of handouts, which I always hand out, and some of which are probably very useful, some of which are funny, and some of which are probably just dumb. But if anybody wants it, they can email me, and I have it on a Word file. I'll just send it back to you. And it includes the blog post of the greatest query letter ever written.
Nice.
Love it. Love it. And by the way, thank you for providing that, Andy, because we've included it in the virtual gift bag. So everybody who's attending will get an email with that virtual gift bag that will have that in it, plus a bunch of other stuff too. Smashwords donated.
I already sent it to you, right?
You did.
Right.
You did.
Okay.
Yep. We got it. We
Awesome.
got it. So that's great. Thank you for that. All right. Another question. This is tapping into marketing a little bit. How important is having an author platform or a lot of followers on social media?
I think platform, it's more important for nonfiction than fiction. Authors are endlessly fascinated about platform. And I like to tell people that platform is one of 2 things. Either you have an endowed chair at Harvard or you're sleeping with Oprah's hairdresser. And so, in other words, they want to know that you're an expert in the subject that you're writing about, but also that you're able to promote your book. It's less important with fiction. It looks like everybody in the audience here has written fiction, where a platform is essentially how many copies did your last book sell? And if it didn't sell very many, you have problems. It's better to be a debut author than to have your previous book bomb. But I think, when I see fiction, if you've won awards, if those are important to me, if you've previously been published, even though your book from a large publisher, even though your book may not have done that well, that tells me that other people who I respect your writing. So those are important. And if you're a debut author, who has previously been in the computer business or something like that, your platform is your first paragraph, not to put too fine a point on it. I learn a lot on the first paragraph, not if the book's going to work, but if the person has talent.
I have one thing to add to kind of piggyback on Andy. Totally agree. If you're nonfiction, it's really necessary. If you're fiction, it's not. But what I'll say is more important for fiction authors more than anything is just your social media presence in general and having a website. The very first thing that agents do is look at your website, look you up on Instagram, look you up on Facebook. They kind of try to get a read of who you are as a person and whether they'd want to even work with you. I know that's terrible to say, but they kind of will look at you across social media and be like, what kind of a person am I about to interact with? And so I always encourage my clients to always put your best foot forward on social media. If you have, stuff that you want to do, make it private, but for your author page, your author Instagram, your author whatever, make sure that it's really professional and best foot forward, showing like just the type of person that you are professionally. So and definitely having a website, even with some excerpts of your writing, because again, they want to get to know you as much as they can. When they're interested in you, they want to kind of have like a preview of what it would be like to work with you and see your work and see just kind of like your vibe or whatever. I know that's kind of a catchy word, but so that's my 2 cents because I know it. I mean, I know that they will look you up at your social media handles immediately if they're interested. So that's like my 2 cents about platform versus just social media presence in general.
Yeah, I don't think you have to have 1 million followers, but I definitely, I second that. You have to have a presence. In the age of social media and marketing, virtual tours and things like that, because of COVID and things like that, it really helps sell you as an author if you have a platform, if you have a space, if you have some sort of website, social media presence. It's essential in the marketing process. So. Yeah.
One thing that I was going to also say is like, even just like when you attend an event, like put it up. Like when you're taking a class, put it up. Like agents love to see that you're active and like, honing your craft, wanting to learn more. Like they want to work with people that aren't just one trick ponies. Like they want to work with people that are constantly looking to improve themselves and their writing skills. So like I tell clients, every time you attend a conference, like live tweet it, put it up that you're there. Like tell like a nugget of something you've learned. Like that makes you look, not makes you look like you are intriguing. Like that it shows the world that like, hey, this isn't just a hobby to me. This is something that I'm truly like passionate about. And that's what they want to see. They want to see that this isn't just like, that if you're really looking to be a professional paid author, that you're really investing some time like in doing that. So that looks really, 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 really good to them.
The other thing I'd add too is if you know any authors or famous people who might say something nice about your book, I find that has given us a real leg up. Send the manuscript to them first, assuming you know them well enough, and get them to give you what we call a blurb. And I have found that has helped in nonfiction as well as fiction, just as a way in the door.
That's very true. If you have a blurb before, write it out the gate before you even, submit, because usually they want you to do that before, when the book's being published, they want you to get blurbs. But if you have that already, like that's totally awesome. Absolutely. Very good point. I did want to say one thing about social media. God's sake, make sure you don't have typos in your posts. I mean, come on. How are you going to be taken seriously as a writer if you have like a mess, if you've misspelled things, use punctuation properly. You're a writer. This is every single post is an audition for you. You don't know. And on your website, yes, definitely have a website. I got my first novel published because an editor looked on my website and saw an excerpt of my novel and asked for it. So like, there you go. Every single thing you do, and people have different beliefs about how much to put of something, a sample. At the time I had a chapter, I would say now probably just have a page, but whatever. But I'm not telling anybody to do anything. I'm not a lawyer or anything. But just have a presence because you never know who's going to notice you.
I was going to tell a really cool story. One of my personal good friends, she had a website that she did a blog about writing her novel in the first 100 days after her baby was born. Like she just journaled it basically. And she ended up getting a 2-book deal from HarperCollins Teen just because of that. Like when she queried, they came to her and they were fascinated. And so so I'm saying it really does work when you do it. She didn't have a huge following on her blog, but they were intrigued that she'd written every single day for 100. They're like, this girl's dedicated and she's talented. We're signing her for 2 books. Like
that's amazing.
So it was awesome.
Yeah. Look at Julie and Julia. Like I get so angry at that. All she did was cook someone else's recipes. It infuriates me, but there you go.
What I'll add too, like when I work with new authors, you don't have to master every single platform, right? You don't have to be on Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok. Do 1 or 2, have a presence on 1 or 2, whatever's comfortable for you, but have a presence on 1 or 2 with your website and really just have that community there. And that will really help get acquired. Your books get acquired.
Yeah, I'll underscore that, Angela, because I feel the same way when I'm advising clients and potential clients. Rock out 1 or 2 rather than trying to be all things to all people. And the other small bit of advice I'll add too is having an email list is something that's an important part of that platform as well. And making sure that your audience that you've already developed is the same audience as the book. I've seen the business person who suddenly decided to write a romance novel talk about their incredible platform, but it's because of their business connections. And that needs to translate for a publisher into sales. And that's kind of a big leap to make. So those are just a couple of little things I'll throw in there as well. We have another question This person heard on one of the previous panels today that mashing up genres is tough for agents to deal with. They don't want multiple genre mashups in one book, but sometimes those are also best-selling books. What are your thoughts on genre mashups when you're being pitched?
As a person that's in TV, like I can speak to the TV side that we find it really fascinating because that just means that our target audience is larger. I've never really considered that it is an issue from like this is kind of fascinating to me to hear this, and maybe some other people have heard it. I've never really had pushback. Like I've done a few that have been genre mashing. I guess it may be that it's just all about how you go about pitching it and how you go about writing it. But I just know from a TV standpoint, anytime you take like action adventure, because those technically are different, romantic comedy, because those are technically two different things that you put together. But even like other things, all we say is it expands our target audience and gives us more chance to bring people in. So like, I haven't seen a problem with it, but I'm fascinated to hear what the other panelists would say.
I don't have a problem with that. Particularly, when I do YA fiction, it's usually sort of a mashup with literary fiction. What I do have a problem with is when people say, well, this is prescriptive health book, but it's also my memoir. And when they do that, it's a clue to me that they're trying to shoehorn several different books into one, and they're not willing to make the choice that you have to make. But, a lot of, when you're doing fiction, Eleanor's book, which I sent out, it's really adult kind of literary fiction, but it's also a thriller. So I said, this is a thriller. Thriller / adult crime fiction. And I think, and that's perfectly fine. And that's what it is.
I think also it depends on the target, the market. I feel like there's less wiggle room when you're doing kidlit to kind of mash up those two, mash up genres, because it's so prescribed and people want their picture books a specific way. They want their early readers a specific way in this formulaic. And so if you're writing for older audiences or YA, I think you have a little bit more flexibility.
True.
I have a book now. It's driving me crazy because it's one of the best books I've ever worked on, and it's the narrator is a 16-year-old Palestinian girl living in the West Bank, and the writer is a literary fiction author, and it would work either way or both ways. And I've now sent it out to about 100 places because I've sent it to both literary fiction and YA fiction editors, and we will just have to see what happens.
Interesting. Anybody else want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I would add that sometimes when things really are mashups and we can't find a home for them in the traditional world, it's one of the reasons that I like so much to work in these non-traditional worlds. That if you decide, we just can't find a publisher, or we want to give it a limited time and we can't find a publisher, hybrid or self-publishing or assisted self-publishing are all completely legitimate ways to publish as long as you do it well. And of course, there's a list of things that one must follow, but I'm finding that's one of the best categories, shall we say, for non-traditional publishing now is that books that cross categories, and the publishers have a really hard time, again, putting on the right shelf. They don't know where it's going to go. We certainly know that there are readers out there, and we're not going to dumb down the book because the industry feels that only one will work. And I think readers are very sophisticated and can welcome things that are mashups frequently. So that's, there are ways to do it. If for some reason you don't succeed in the traditional world, have a plan B and go forward and publish it in a different way. But in any event, be ready to do marketing. You will need to do that.
Excellent advice. I think this one might be a little bit more for Angela, and I come across this a lot too. If somebody has a children's book that they want to pitch, should they already have the illustrator to go with it, or is that something that comes with the publisher?
No. I often get people, so it depends. Sorry, let me take back my no. If you are an author illustrator, amazing. send your spec character sketches with your manuscript. If you have something in mind for the main character, that's amazing. But typically when you acquire a picture book or any sort of children's illustrated book, you just acquire the text, and then the publisher is responsible for matching an illustrator and moving the project forward. So unless you are an author illustrator, I would say don't worry about paying the money to have somebody, because a publisher may say, I love your text, but we're going a different direction with the characters, right? And then you've acquired these sketches and, now you're out of money. So I would say worry about the text unless you're an illustrator already, and just send the text, a very strong manuscript.
Yeah, because if you submit with an illustrator, you're going to be discounted usually, because they're going to be like, this person doesn't even understand the market. That's why I cannot stress it enough. Join SCBWI, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. They will answer all questions. It's a nonprofit, so they don't have any motive but to help you. And they are in the children's book industry. They are the people to go to, and we're very fortunate that they exist, because that's really how I learned how to do a lot of where to go to ultimately get many of my books are children's books, and I learned how to do all that from SCBWI.
I think there are other organizations that help with that too. I like PubWest. I've been a part of IBPA. IBPA is amazing. They do
IBPA is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, they do a lot of similar things like what you're talking about, where there's like webinars and things for knowledge and education and things like that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other thoughts on that? Anybody else want to chime in? All right. Well, we're running up against the clock right now, and I don't know if we're going to have Susan or not. I guess what I could do is maybe if she wanted to make a video pitch, if she hasn't already done so in the pitching room, I can make sure everybody gets that. So she has her moment to pitch. I'll give it just a few more moments here. It's about 1:45 right now. So she might come through here right at the end. But in the meantime, how about if we do any closing thoughts? And I'll just start with April, and we'll go around. If anybody has anything else that they want to add, they didn't get a chance to drop it in there. Anything else that you want to say before we end?
Sure. Thank you, Desiree. This is a wonderful opportunity. And thank you again for the authors who pitched and for the others on here. I always learn so much from these sessions myself, which we can then carry forward to the next author. But again, I'm such an advocate for non-traditional that I probably sound like a broken record. But again, it is one thing to try very hard to be published in a traditional way. But the fact is that I don't think readers really care who your publisher is, as long as your book is well-written, well-edited, has a good cover. People judge books by their cover, and they buy books by their cover, and comes in the format that they like. And so regardless of which path you go, you need to make sure you have at least a trade paperback, an ebook, and an audiobook available for your readers. But it really is a big, wide world now, and I see authors succeeding in non-traditional ways that just thrill me daily.
Andy, any final thoughts for us? Oh, go ahead, unmute your microphone, Andy.
I agree with April. We mentioned earlier, it's so hard to get published by these traditional publishers now, much harder than it used to be. And there's no, and I am frustrated because I am extremely selective about what I take on. I probably reject 20 things a day from my slush pile. And when I accept something, it's good. It's good enough to get published. It's better than most of the stuff that's being published. And sometimes it doesn't get published for lots of different reasons. And I've ultimately sent several of my people to a hybrid publisher, and they've done a wonderful job. One guy's book is doing very good, very, very well with it. So I think people should think about that. They shouldn't get discouraged. Most of the authors I know who are very successful authors, their first 4 books were rejected, and move on to the next book. And I hope you love writing because I think that's the payoff. I like to quote the last line of Camus' Myth of Sisyphus, where he said, "The struggle itself to the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." And I think that's the way people should look at their work as a writer.
I like that. Whitney, final thoughts?
This was awesome. I totally echo April. Every time I do something like this, I'm just blown away by people's bravery, because I know that putting anything out there that's personal is just so intimidating and hard. And kind of echoing Andy, what I always just encourage my writers the most with is just make sure that you're having fun, because the minute that you stop having fun is the minute that your work suffers. And so it's okay. Like I just tell people, extend grace to yourself in this process. It's always okay to take a break. Don't beat yourself up. Writing is an extremely emotionally taxing thing. Like you're pouring your soul onto the page. And so I'm just like, we all kind of have our things that we're passionate about. I'm really passionate about mental health for writers, because I know that so many writers struggle with that feeling of validation, or like, am I ever going to make it this way? And just kind of like what they have said, it's like, there's so many ways to do that now. And so I would just encourage everyone, make sure you're in the right space, make sure that you're having fun, have grace for yourself, take breaks if you need to, but don't give up. And keep going. Like he said, I've had so many friends that have gotten to the final pitching round. I think what people don't understand is like your book is literally pitched. If you go the traditional route, you have to pitch it technically 3 times. You pitch it to the agent pitches it to the editorial board. And then if they take it at the publishing house, at the editorial board, then they come together and do a final pitch to decide what books they're acquiring that month. So it really goes through 3 or 4 pitches. And I don't think people realize.
They have to pitch it to the bookseller, and the bookseller has to pitch
exactly.
it to the
it literally is like a baby being born, like the miracle and that has to go through. It's like, if it ever reaches, that is a miracle, legit, on the traditional side. So I'll have to say, give grace to yourself, make sure you're having fun, take breaks, take care of yourself, because it's a really emotional process. And we all care about y'all and we want you to succeed. So that's kind of like my final encouragement and, final words to say.
I love it. So manuscripts are kind of like sperm.
Yes, totally. And the agent is the egg. No, I'm kidding.
Right. Angela, what are your final thoughts?
I'm going to echo previous thoughts and say, spread your wings to an indie publishing company. Sunday Dinner Publishing is open for submissions all the way through December, so to the end of the month. We are a small indie company, small but mighty, founded by educators. So our big mission is to highlight inclusive stories, authentic writing, which brings everyone to the table. So that's kind of what we're looking for, specifically highlighting Black, Indigenous, people of color, and LGBTQ and other marginalized voices. So I would end with Sunday Dinner Publishing is accepting submissions. So if you have a kidlit book, polish it up, polish your pitch up, make sure you use all of the critiques that we, kind of did today, and send it over. Yeah.
Fantastic. Selene, final thoughts?
Oh, I'm not muted. Well, I go by the motto, the saying that Henry Ford said. I know it was a horrible person, but he had a good quote. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And as a writer, you have to be the believer in yourself. You have to make it happen. It's not like a career where you go to be a teacher or a doctor and the da-da-da-da-da-da, and voila, there you are. No, it's a constant thing where you're propelling yourself, and you have to make sure that you give yourself permission to succeed. You have to believe in yourself, or no one else will believe in you. I recommend the book Bird by Bird. Amazing book it's my writing Bible. And she says in it specifically, a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time. Well, she recommends write enough to fit inside a 1-inch picture frame. And that's so freeing. It's a beautiful book. Anne Lamott wrote it. And I highly recommend you read that. But just remember, you can do it. No one's born published. Okay?
It's a great saying. Nobody is born published. And I just would like to remind everybody that we do have the pitching room. And part of that is a knowledge base that'll help you develop that query letter, the synopsis, give you some advice. And not only that, I think we might do the Brave New Writer again at the next BookFest, which will happen in the spring. So you now have plenty of time to get those pitching materials ready and up for us to consider for next time. And not only is April and Andy and Angela, all those A's, and Whitney, agents that have access to that and maybe back for the next time, but we've invited other agents to check that out as well. So that is a resource that we would like to offer people. So check that out in the pitching room. And other than that, I'm so sorry we could not get to Susanna. We will make some considerations. Like I said, I'll send you a video, make sure you get her stuff, because I was just unfortunate because of those technical difficulties. And other than that, April, Andy, Whitney, Angela, Selene, thank you so much for doing this and being part of Brave New Writer on the BookFest Adventure. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. You bet.
Yes, thank you.